Halloween 2015. So when I was 13, I was already a bit old to be out trick-or-treating, but my friends and I decided to go. We were old enough not to need parents to come with us, as it was a pretty safe neighborhood. In my old neighborhood, there was a row of houses that went over the top extravagant on decorations every year. Usually, they made their houses look straight out of a Pirates of the Caribbean set, but this year, they were all different horror movies. There was one house that seemed a touch off, though. Not as many decorations, and the lights were off. This was the house that was supposed to be modeled after the Jason movies. Dude with a mask, you know him. But all they had was a man out front, pretending to trim bushes with a fake chainsaw. I happen to know the girl who lived there, and the man wasn't her father, so I just assumed it was her older brother who was a senior in college, who I knew about, but never met. It was creepy, but it was Halloween. It was supposed to be. He would turn the chainsaw on and hold it near the bushes, laugh a little, and then walk around. I was walking out of the house across from him with my friends, and he stopped and stared at us from across the street. Nothing crazy. He was trying to scare us, and it worked. But not a, haha, it's Halloween and that's scary. That's fun, let's get more candy type of scare. It was more of a, what is this dude doing? I don't feel right type of scare for me. All of a sudden, a huge group of people walked out of the house after us, and I couldn't see him anymore. It wasn't until about 10 minutes later that I saw him again on a different street. It was about 10:45, and my friends and I decided it was time to head home. We all split up, and I started walking home. Phone dead, of course. I get the weirdest feeling of chills and turn around. He's next to some people about 6 houses back on the other side of the street. No big deal. I pass a few more houses, and I feel off. I turn around, and he's now 3 houses behind me and on my side of the street. I pick up the pace a little, and like the dumb 13-year-old I was, cut through a few backyards to get away from this creep. I start to panic, and I break out into a run. I don't even have to turn around to know that he is behind me. I can hear him. I hop back onto the sidewalk in hopes that people are there so I don't have to be alone. No dice. I start to get really scared and decided that since a grown man is chasing me and I cannot outrun a grown man, I'm going to have to just stop dead in my tracks and face him. That's what I do, and he does the same. We are standing, facing each other, with about 2 houses distance between each other. He then starts his chainsaw and holds it near a bush out in front of the house he's next to. He then trims it, letting me know that this isn't a toy. It's real and has a chain on it. I scream absolute bloody murder, and luckily the lights on the houses turn on. He turns and runs. I book it home, and have never been trick-or-treating since. The next week, I talked to my friend who lives at that house to tell her what a creep her brother was for chasing me like he did, and that I was actually scared, and he took it too far. She looks at me confused and said he was still in Oregon at OCU. Seems like a lot of people have scary experiences with Ouija boards. Here's mine. Back on Halloween night 2019, I was at a party with my friend Alex and a couple of his friends. We were having a good time jamming out to spooky Halloween music. We'd all been partying pretty good, and some of us were getting tired, but we wanted to play a board or card game or something to end the night with. One of Alex's friends, who will have her name changed to Lexi for privacy reasons, suggested we do a Ouija board like in the movies. Now, I grew up in a pretty standard Christian home and was always warned around Halloween every year to stay away from Ouija boards, blah, blah, blah. They are evil, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't really buy into it very much. Well, none of us actually had a Ouija board or knew where to find one. So Lexi suggested we just make our own. So of course, being dumb teenagers, we just looked up a design and took to a Sharpie and drew one up, using an old guitar pick as a pointer. We sat down and started asking it questions. At first, the questions were stupid, like, Which one of us is the dumbest? Which one of us will make the most money after high school? Just dumb questions, and we would get a bunch of no's, like the board was annoyed or something. Well, after a while of asking dumb questions, Lexi asked the board if there was anyone who would like to talk to us. Then the whole mood in the room changed. It felt colder, and everyone for some reason felt uneasy. The pointer slowly moved over to yes. Almost everyone felt super uncomfortable. But one of our friends, who I'll call Mike, wasn't convinced. He was convinced someone else was just moving the pointer to scare everyone. Mike decided to conduct a little test and asked the board to name a dead relative that no one in the room knew about. And right then and there, the board spelled out Eleanor. Everyone started freaking out because we all knew Mike's grandmother, and her name was Irene. Apparently Eleanor was his great-great-aunt, who'd passed on before his mom had died. At that point, we were all scared shitless and asked what the board wanted. The board started spelling out extremely vulgar obscenities and weird words no one knew. We quickly said goodbye and ended the session. We turned on the lights, and everyone was so freaked out. We threw out the board, and none of us have touched a board since. A few years back, my now husband and I were living with my mom. My husband had started a new job where he was working 14-hour shifts and wouldn't get home until 11 p.m. My brother liked to go out, so he also wasn't home. This meant my mom and I were alone on Halloween. We lived on a busy street, so we ran out of candy at around 9 p.m. My mom put a sign on the door, and we went to bed. For some background, we had 5 dogs in the house. At this point, my brother was about 21 years old, and I was 22. My brother has a female German Shepherd and Husky mix named Coco, and she is very good at reading our body language. Our screen door had a large window and didn't lock, and our main door didn't have a view window. So the doorbell rings at around 11:30 p.m., and I got up instantly and ran to the door. I stupidly assumed without a thought that it was my husband coming home from work. I opened the door without thinking, and there were 2 very large people wearing black hoodies and black sweats. I knew the screen door didn't lock, so I realized this was a bad situation. My mom had heard the doorbell as well, so she was also walking to the door. My husband had keys to the house, so my mom was having good instincts, realizing it wasn't him, and decided to come with me to the door. I was stunned and didn't say anything, but my mom comes from behind me and aggressively says, "Can I help you?" Before they can even speak, Coco jumps at the glass and starts barking and growling at them. When her paws pushed to the door, it opened slightly, and the 2 people took a step back. They both just said, "Trick or treat." My mom said, "Don't you see the sign? We're out of candy." Then the 2 people walked away. My husband came home 15 minutes later, and we told him what happened. Coco for sure saved us from a bad situation. She never acts that aggressively when people come to the door. The next morning, we saw in the news, a few blocks away, that 2 people that matched the description of the 2 people that came to our door were shot and killed because they tried to rob the home of an off-duty police officer. The time of the incident was 30 minutes after the 2 people came to our door. It was Halloween night, and I was about 11. My mom had taken me to my cousin Lucy's house to trick-or-treat because a few kids from my school lived on her street. Also, her, at the time, closeted gay friend was with her, but we would all joke that we thought that they were dating. We were allowed to walk quite a distance from my cousin's house, probably further than most older kids could or should, for that matter. We trick-or-treated for a while and decided to make our way to the local Tesco, a local supermarket, to get a pumpkin, as they were usually cheapest on Halloween night. On our way, we noticed a grown man in normal clothes, besides one of those extra gruesome Halloween masks, made seemingly just so adults can scare kids. It was of an incredibly mutilated and bloodied face. He was hiding amid some bushes, but it seemed like he wanted us to see him. I remember thinking it was weird because he definitely seemed old judging by his hands, so he wasn't just some teenager. I realized he seemed like one of those sad old dudes that get some perverse joy out of scaring little kids. When we came out of the shop, we had a pumpkin each because they were so cheap. We saw the guy had moved to a closer bush and was tilting his head like something out of a horror movie. We laughed it off and walked back to Lucy's house. Just before we reached Lucy's street, we stopped for some reason. I think we were laughing at a joke or something. Then, as I was in the back of the group, I noticed the creepy guy was right behind us with his arms raised, and then he made an attempt to grab me, but I stepped back. Not too exaggerated to the point he was obviously joking, but to the point where it wasn't entirely obvious whether he was playing a simple prank or absolutely insane. I assumed since he'd followed us home, it was Lucy's dad Richie with some fake old guy gloves on, so I just turned around and said, "Uncle Rich?" as my friends bolted away, and I soon followed. We got to Lucy's house and told our parents, and they seemed very concerned for some reason. A few years later, my dad told me that the guy on Lucy's street had been arrested for pedophilia before he moved in there. So my dad and Rich threatened him that he ever came near us, that they would get him. I assumed this was an empty threat, although I do know how tough and protective dads can be, but I think the pedo thought it was an empty threat too. I've always wondered, if that was him, what could have happened to me and my friends. So, creepy guy who is possibly a pedophile, let's not meet again.